Hey, it's Cairo. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're talking about all the blue cards that you need to know from Phyrexia All Will Be One. If you're a blue player, here's how you give the old razzle-dazzle to the opponent. Here we go. Starting off strong, Mercurial Spelldancer, 1 blue, 1 generic for Phyrexian Rogue, which matters in certain formats. It cannot be blocked. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put an oil counter on Mercurial Spelldancer. And when it deals combat damage to a player, you may remove 2 oil counters from it. If you do, when you cast your next instant or sorcery this turn, you may copy it and choose new targets for the copy. The reason I love this card so much is it fits right in with Izzet Spellslinger strategies where you have proactive burn spells and proactive bounce spells that you can copy and just make your opponent's life miserable. Downside of this card is that it has to be in an assertive strategy. It has to deal damage for you to be able to copy spells, so you're going to have to be proactively playing spells on your turn and not saving them to react on your opponent's turns. If there are spells in your format that have 2 options, maybe they're modal, either does some damage to a thing or counters a spell, that's fantastic because you can be proactive, deal some damage with this, copy that spell to deal more damage and burn out their creatures or right to their face. And if you don't want to, hold that back to counter a spell. Mercurial Spelldancer is even probably pretty good in mill in certain formats. Having a 2-drop that allows you to copy your mill spells, because a lot of times with mill, you're very precise. So the game is won or lost on that knife's edge, and a lot of times you're at like 2 or 3 life. Spelldancer also receives oil counters off of your enchantments, your artifacts, your planeswalkers, all that. So it's best played in a deck that relies on instants and sorceries, but it also gets oil counters from not just instants and sorceries. To put the old cherry on the top, in standard we are getting a lot of cards that proliferate, so it's not going to be uncommon to cast a spell that proliferates, put an oil counter on this and put another oil counter on it, and if you already have oil counters on it, you can remove oil counters to copy that spell. You see where I'm going. So I think Mercurial Spelldancer it's in a little package. It's a 2-drop, but I think it's very good, and it's going to see some play in some formats. Next up is Mesmerizing Dose. This is double blue, 1 generic for an aura. When it comes in, you tap an enchanted creature, then you proliferate. An enchanted creature doesn't untap during its controller's untap step. So I included this in this list because this is the only blue removal spell that we've seen so far for limited. As always, this effect is going to be most potent against aggro, probably red and white to tap down their equipment creatures with their 2/2 rebels that they're making in this set. You're going to be in a really good spot if somebody plays this against you when you're playing black and red, because there's a heavy sacrifice theme in limited. It's something to be aware of. Even if they only have blue mana, they do have access to Mesmerizing Dose. Shifting away from limited back to constructed, Mindsplice Apparatus. I think this card's going to be pretty insane. 1 blue, 3 generic for an artifact with flash, which is important. At the beginning of your upkeep, put an oil counter on Mindsplice Apparatus, and instant and sorcery spells you cast cost 1 less for each oil counter on it. Now this is straight up a control card, right? Aggro doesn't want this, mid-range doesn't want this. You want mega busted, high cost instant and sorcery spells that come down and win you the game, and this is going to help you do that. Especially love that it has flash on it. That means you can save it, wait on turn 4, make a reactive play to what they're doing, and if they don't do anything important, you throw it on Mindsplice Apparatus. Maybe on your next turn you wipe the board, relieve the pressure off of you. This thing just keeps ticking up counters. Throw in some proliferate in there, start putting some extra counters on this thing, and all of a sudden your 3 and 4 cost instants and sorceries start costing 1. Very cool. The flash is really what makes it for me. This card without flash, forcing you to commit to your turn 4 by putting this down, not really into it, but flash makes this card. I think it's going to be very good. Let's look at a card that doesn't look like much on the surface, but is going to make huge impacts in probably Commander and Modern. This is Minor Misstep. It's 1 blue mana instant, counter target spell with mana value 1 or less. Now it doesn't seem that potent, right? But whenever you take a look at some formats where they have a lot of really powerful 1-drops, Commander has Soul Ring, Modern has Ragavan Nimble Pilfer, Sigarda's Aid, Colossus Hammer, Path to Exile, and Thoughtseize. All of these can be countered by Minor Misstep. So it doesn't look like much, but it's honest work. Next up we have a mythic rare. It's Tekuthal, Inquiry Dominus, and each color gets a Dominus. There's a whole cycle in All Will Be One. This is double blue, 2 generic for a 3/5 flying. If you would proliferate twice instead. And 1 Phyrexian blue, remove 3 counters from among other artifacts, creatures, or planeswalkers you control. Put an indestructible counter on Tekuthal, Inquiry Dominus. This is going to synergize insanely well with Connive from Streets of New Capenna, where we've seen Esper Connive just go out of control with +1/+1 counters with Rafine's Scheming Seer. This can also proliferate your counters on sagas, allowing you to fine-tune what effects you want to have all at once. You can proliferate your loyalty counters on planeswalkers. Also, if you notice, this indestructibility is not a temporary effect. This is in the form of a counter, which is actually very crucial, because every time you proliferate, you can put another indestructible counter on this. So you have a way to move counters from one permanent to another. You can make other things indestructible. This is great. You can do this in response to a board wipe. It's an evasive creature, has flying. I love Tekuthal, and I think it's definitely going to see play, probably in blue-black, Esper, blue-black, white, something like that. Next up is Unctus Grand Metatect, double blue, 1 generic, 2/4, Phyrexia and Vidalkin. Other blue creatures you control have, whenever this creature becomes tapped, draw a card and then discard a card. Other artifact creatures you control get +1/+1, and a Phyrexian blue until end of turn. Target creature you control becomes a blue artifact in addition to its other types and colors, activate only as a sorcery. So if you watch my video on limited archetypes, we know that this control build in limited is blue-white artifact control, so there's a lot of artifact synergies in that particular color pair. But we're also just coming off of the Brothers War, where there are a lot of really good prototype artifact creatures. And so there are going to be a lot of cool opportunities to use some of the really powerful artifacts from the Brothers War in Standard with Unctus Grand Metatech as an artifact lord. The ability that makes you draw a card then discard a card is good for filtering out cards that you don't want in your hand. It's also great for having cards that have flashback or that you can play from your graveyard, unearth, etc. And sort of a fringe ability, he can make something else a blue artifact. So Go for the Throat is a popular removal in Standard right now. It's destroy target non-artifact creature. Well, Unctus can make it an artifact temporarily. So I think there's a lot of potential with the build around here. I don't know if it's going to be generally good, but a deck that's built around artifacts can surely fit Unctus in it. This one's kind of like fringe. I don't know if it's going to be playable and constructed, but it's certainly a limited bomb. This is 1 blue, 4 generic for Serum Sovereign. It's a Phyrexian Sphinx. It's a 4/4 flyer for 5, first of all. Pretty good. When you cast a non-creature spell, put an oil counter on it. Tap a blue mana, remove an oil counter from it, draw a card, then scry 2. This strikes me as being very good in limited. Flying creatures are very good. This is a beating. If you're ahead, you just attack for 4 damage every turn. If you're in kind of a stalled out board state where they have a flyer and you can't really attack, we'll just cast some non-creature spells, draw some more cards, eventually outvalue them with card draw for this. And with the amount of proliferate that's going to be around, it's not going to be that hard to add additional oil counters to this. And the fact that you can do it at instant speed is great. You can hold up spells, react to what they're doing. If they're not doing anything important, at the end of their turn, remove an oil counter, tap your blue mana, draw a card, scry 2, set up your next turn. I think Serum Sovereign's very good in limited. I don't know it's fringe unconstructed, but we'll see. Experimental Augury is a new common. It's 1 blue, 1 generic for an instant. Look at the top 3 cards of your library, put 1 into your hand, the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. And then here's the part that actually matters a lot. Proliferate. Almost every set has something like this. Sometimes it's Surveil, where you put things into your graveyard. Having an instant 2-drop that proliferates and it can catch people off guard, whether you want to add some oil counters, you want to add some +1/+1 counters to your creatures, or proliferate your Planeswalker or your Saga or whatever, is very, very powerful. And I expect this card to be see play in some control builds, maybe even like an Is It Spells Matter deck. This last one is Ichormoon Gauntlet. It's 1 blue, 2 generic for an artifact. Planeswalkers you control have 0 proliferate, and -12 take an extra turn after this one. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, choose a counter on target permanent, put an additional counter of that kind on that permanent. So this is not quite proliferate, because you get to only choose 1 permanent, and you get to put 1 counter of an additional type. I posted a link to this card on Twitter, and I was like, I just don't really get the Planeswalker aspect of this. I feel like if you have a lot of Planeswalkers out, you're already winning the game, so this feels like win more. But then people were kind of like saying, okay, this is going to be really good with the Planeswalkers that don't have the ability to plus themselves at all. They're 0 or minus, which is a very, very good point. And I started reanalyzing this card, and I was like, this card actually pretty good. And then somebody also told me, like, you're kind of looking at it wrong. It's not really the first paragraph that matters the most. It's the second one. And the more I reread it, I was like, yeah, this actually does seem pretty good. I think this will see some play somewhere. I will say this, though. I am fairly confident that this is a, rated F in limited, just because the Planeswalker thing is not going to matter, and you're probably not going to have that many non-creature spells to make this really worth it. So that's the video for today. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you got something from it. If you did, please hit that thumbs up. It's free. It supports the channel. Consider subscribing or checking out one of these videos right here. Thank you for everybody who has subscribed. We're just over 3,000 subscribers, and it really, really is the lifeblood of the channel. It helps me continue what I do, helps me to create new videos, and I thank you very, very much. Until next time, have a great day.